My neighbor's dog used my baby as a chew toy. Now they're suing me for thousands. I was still covered in my son's blood when the Johnsons walked into the hospital waiting room. How dare you, Karen Johnson says, loud enough for everyone to hear. How dare you let your son torture our Chewbacca? My hands won't stop shaking. James has been in surgery for 20 minutes. The doctor says his arm was shredded, possible nerve damage, maybe permanent disability. He's 8 and might never have full use of his right arm because their German shepherd dragged him across our yard like prey. Get away from me, I managed to say. We have videos, Brad Johnson announces, holding up his phone. Your son throwing rocks at Chewbacca through the fence, tormenting him. We're filing charges. Michael jumps up from his chair. Our son is in surgery. Your dog nearly killed him. Because James provoked him, Karen insists. Chewbacca is traumatized. He won't even eat now. The emergency vet bills are already over $2,000. I can't process this. Can't understand how they're talking about vet bills while my baby is on an operating table. A nurse approaches, asking them to lower their voices, but Karen's already pulling out papers from her purse. Our lawyer drafted this on the way here. $50,000 for Chewbacca's emotional distress and rehabilitation. Your son is a menace. Security arrives as Michael lunges forward. 2 guards separate them while I stare at the legal documents. My son's blood is literally still under my fingernails and they're serving me papers. Ma'am, they need to leave, the security guard says to me. But Karen's not done. Check your phone, Linda. I sent the video. Everyone will see what your son did. They're escorted out, but the damage is done. Other families in the waiting room are staring, whispering. I check my phone with trembling fingers and find she's posted it on the neighborhood Facebook page. Grainy security footage of James by the fence. You can't see any rocks, but comments are already piling up. That poor dog. Some parents can't control their children. I always knew that boy was trouble. Michael's reading over my shoulder. This is insane. James was playing in our own yard. Their dog broke through the fence. My phone rings. Unknown number. I answer without thinking. Mrs. Conway? This is Channel 6 News. We saw the video of your son provoking a neighbor's dog. Can you comment on the lawsuit? I hang up. It's been 30 minutes since the attack and somehow I'm the villain. Another call. Our insurance company. They've already received a claim from the Johnsons. The surgeon appears in the doorway and my heart stops. Everything else vanishes. He's pulling off his mask and I can't read his expression. James is out of surgery. We saved the arm, but there's extensive damage. He'll need multiple reconstructive surgeries. Physical therapy for months, maybe years. Can I see him? Soon. He's asking for you. The surgeon pauses. The police need to speak with you. And animal control is here. In the hallway, 2 officers wait with clipboards. They've already interviewed the Johnsons. Already watched their video. One officer shows me a report with 6 previous complaints about Chewbacca. All dismissed. All blamed on the victims provoking him. But this time is different, the officer says. Your son's injuries are severe enough for criminal charges. Against the Johnsons? We need to investigate all parties. All parties. Like my 8-year-old might be criminally liable for being mauled. My phone buzzes constantly. Reporters, neighbors, the school asking about James's behavioral issues mentioned in the viral video. A woman approaches as the officers leave. She's been sitting nearby, heard everything. The Johnsons did this to my daughter 2 years ago, she whispers. Their last dog. Same exact thing. Said she provoked it, sued us. We lost our house fighting it. They've done this to 4 families I know of. I grab her arm before she can walk away. My voice comes out shaky, but I need those names. She pulls out her phone and her thumbs move fast across the screen. My phone buzzes seconds later with a text containing 4 names and addresses. Martinez family, daughter bid on face, settled for $8,000. Chen family, son bid on leg, lost lawsuit, paid $12,000. Rodriguez family, toddler bid on hand, moved away after harassment. Anderson family, elderly woman bit walking past their yard, settled for $5,000. Each entry includes dates and brief notes about how the Johnsons blamed the victims and threatened legal action. Diane squeezes my hand hard and tells me to fight them. Then she's gone and I'm staring at my phone trying to process that this has happened 4 times before and nobody stopped them. A nurse appears in the doorway and says I can see James now. I follow her down a hallway that smells like cleaning solution and fear. The recovery room is small and cold. James lies in a bed that makes him look tiny. His right arm wrapped in thick white bandages and suspended in some kind of sling contraption. His eyes are half open and unfocused from the drugs. I move to his side and touch his left hand carefully. He blinks at me slowly and his voice comes out slurred when he asks if Chewbacca is okay. The question hits me like a punch. My baby just had his arm shredded and he's worried about the dog that did it. I tell him Chewbacca is fine and that he needs to rest. He closes his eyes again, and I stand there watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like it's proof he's still here. Michael comes in 20 minutes later with coffee and we set up a rotation. One of us stays while the other tries to sleep in the waiting room chairs. The night drags. James wakes up every hour or so, confused and in pain. The nurses adjust his medication and check his vitals. Around 2 a.m., I'm sitting in the chair next to his bed when my phone starts buzzing. Not just one notification, but dozens, one after another. I check and see the neighborhood Facebook post has been shared to 3 different community groups. The video of James by the fence now has 847 shares, and the comments have multiplied into the hundreds. People I've never met are calling my son a monster, calling me a bad mother, demanding we be kicked out of the neighborhood. I turn off my phone before Michael can see because he's already barely holding it together. Morning comes and Michael takes James' duty while I go home to shower and change. The house feels wrong. I walk through rooms that should feel safe but don't anymore. I find Frederick Tanner's number in the text from Diane and call before I lose my nerve. He answers on the second ring and I explain everything in a rush. The attack, the lawsuit, the viral video, the pattern Diane told me about. He listens without interrupting and then tells me to come to his office at 2 p.m. Bring photos of the yard, the broken fence, any medical records I have. Bring Diane's list. Bring everything. His office is downtown in a building that smells like old wood and carpet. Tanner is maybe 50 with gray hair and tired eyes that have seen too much. I spread everything across his desk. Photos of James's arm before surgery. Photos of the fence with the broken section where Chewbacca came through. Screenshots of the Facebook posts and comments. The lawsuit papers Karen shoved at me in the hospital. Diane's list of previous victims. Tanner studies each item carefully, and then leans back in his leather chair. He explains this is a pattern of aggressive litigation the Johnsons have used for years. They let their dogs hurt people, immediately blame the victims, file lawsuits to intimidate families into silence, and use social media to control the narrative. Most families settle because fighting costs more than paying. He says we need to build a defense immediately and document everything. He tells me to photograph our entire property with timestamps. Save every social media post, every text message, every email. Don't delete anything no matter how upsetting. Avoid any direct contact with the Johnsons and refer all communication through him. He drafts a litigation hold notice right there and sends it electronically to their attorney. The notice warns them not to destroy any evidence including videos, vet records, or documentation of prior complaints. I leave his office feeling like maybe I have some control back. I pick up James from the hospital that afternoon with a thick packet of care instructions. Change bandages twice daily. Watch for signs of infection. Keep arm elevated. Physical therapy starts in 2 weeks. Pain medication every 6 hours. Follow-up surgery scheduled for next Friday. The pharmacist hands me 3 prescription bottles and warns me about side effects. Our house still feels different when we walk through the door, like something broke that can't be fixed. James falls asleep on the couch within minutes and I sit watching him breathe. My phone rings and the insurance adjuster explains that the Johnsons filed a claim against our homeowner's policy. They're seeking $50,000 for Chewbacca's emotional distress and vet bills. The adjuster warns they're also claiming comparative negligence, arguing that James provoked the attack and we're partially liable. I hang up and want to throw the phone across the room. That night, I lie in bed staring at the ceiling while Michael snores beside me. Every time I close my eyes, I see James's face when I found him in the yard, the blood soaking through his shirt faster than I could press towels against the wounds, the way his arm hung at the wrong angle while Chewbacca's jaws stayed locked on his flesh, the sound he made, not quite a scream, but worse somehow. I get up at 5 a.m. because sleep isn't happening. Michael finds me in the kitchen drinking coffee and suggests we document the fence damage before the Johnsons can claim we tampered with it. We walk our property line with cameras as the sun comes up. The section where Chewbacca broke through shows rotted wood and loose posts that clearly failed under pressure. The wood is gray and soft, crumbling when I touch it. The posts lean at angles and pull away from the ground easily. This fence didn't break because James did anything. It broke because the Johnsons never maintained their side and ignored every HOA violation notice about the deteriorating structure. We take photos from every angle, close-ups of the rot, wide shots showing the whole damaged section. Michael measures the gap and photographs the measurements. We document everything Tanner told us to, building our case one photo at a time. Tanner calls me that afternoon and tells me to come to the police station at 4 p.m. to give my formal statement. He coaches me over the phone to stick to facts, avoid emotional language, and mention the prior complaints without pushing an agenda. I drive there alone because Michael stays with James and the police station smells like coffee and floor cleaner. Detective Brooks is maybe 40 with short hair and a no-nonsense expression. She leads me to a small interview room with a metal table and recording equipment. I tell her everything exactly as it happened. James playing in our yard with his ball, the sound of wood breaking, Chewbacca charging across the grass, the way his jaws locked on James's arm and wouldn't let go no matter how hard I hit him. Detective Brooks takes detailed notes and asks specific questions about the fence condition, whether James was near the property line, what happened in the minutes before the attack. When I mention Diane and the pattern of previous incidents, she stops writing and looks up. She asks me to repeat the names and details. She pulls up something on her computer and nods slowly. She explains that animal control has jurisdiction over the dangerous dog determination, but criminal charges would depend on whether the Johnsons showed negligent control. She says the broken fence and prior complaints strengthen the case for negligence. She thanks me for coming in and says she'll be in touch as the investigation continues. Back home, Michael has already called a contractor who arrives within an hour. The guy walks our fence line and shakes his head at the damage. He explains that the posts need replacing and we should add wire mesh backing for extra security. Michael agrees to everything without asking the price. The contractor starts work immediately, pulling out rotted posts and digging new holes. We follow him with cameras, taking before and after photos of every section. We document the new posts going in, the wire mesh being attached, the whole fence line being reinforced. We photograph timestamps on our phones showing the date and time of each repair. Meanwhile, the Johnson side of the fence remains broken with the gap still visible where Chewbacca came through. We photograph that too, showing we're taking reasonable safety steps while they do nothing. That evening, my phone buzzes with notifications. Karen posted again on the neighborhood Facebook page. I open it with shaking hands. She's claiming we're harassing them by building a fortress, and our paranoid overreaction proves we know James was at fault. She says we're trying to intimidate them and make them look bad. The comment section explodes within minutes. Some neighbors defend us, pointing out that repairing a fence after a dog attack is reasonable. But others agree with Karen, saying we're escalating the situation and being dramatic. People I've known for years are taking sides, arguing back and forth, turning our private tragedy into public entertainment. Someone suggests we're planning to sue and the fence is just for show. Another person says both families need to calm down and work it out privately. I want to respond, but Tanner's voice echoes in my head about avoiding direct contact. I screenshot everything instead, saving the post and every single comment for our records. 3 days after the attack, I'm doing laundry when the doorbell rings. I open it to find a woman in business clothes holding a clipboard and county ID badge. She introduces herself as a CPS caseworker and says someone filed a report about James. My stomach drops. She explains that the report claims James has behavioral issues and we're neglectful parents who let him torture animals unsupervised. She needs to come inside and speak with James. I want to slam the door, but I know that will make things worse. I let her in and call Michael home from work. The CPS visit feels like an invasion. The caseworker walks through our house, looking in rooms, opening cabinets, checking the refrigerator. She asks about our daily routine, our work schedules, how we supervise James. She wants to see his bedroom, his toys, his school supplies. She interviews James in the living room while I sit nearby, asking him about his typical day, what he does after school, whether his parents yell at him or punish him. James answers honestly, confused about why this stranger is asking such personal questions. The caseworker asks if he threw rocks at the dog. James says no, he was playing with his ball in the yard. She asks if his parents ever leave him alone outside. No, he says sometimes, but they can see him from the kitchen window. I provide medical records showing James's regular checkups and vaccinations. I show her his report cards with teacher comments about him being kind and helpful. I give her the names and numbers of our pediatrician, his teacher, and 3 neighbors who can vouch for our parenting. The caseworker writes everything down without expression. She says she'll complete her investigation and be in touch. The whole visit takes 90 minutes and leaves me shaking with fury at whoever made that false report. That evening is the monthly HOA meeting. Michael insists we attend to counter the Johnson narrative. I don't want to go, but he's right that staying away makes us look guilty. We walk into the community center with James between us, his arm still heavily bandaged. The room goes quiet when we enter. I can feel people staring at us, at James's bandages, whispering to each other behind their hands. We sit in the back row. The board president runs through normal business like landscaping and pool maintenance. Then Brad stands up during open comments. He proposes a new rule requiring aggressive children to be supervised outdoors at all times. He says the neighborhood needs protection from kids who torment animals and cause dangerous situations. Several people nod in agreement. Michael starts to stand, but I grab his arm. The board president looks uncomfortable and says this isn't the proper channel for rule changes. She tables the discussion for the next meeting. But the damage is done. People are nodding, buying into the lie that James is the problem. We leave before the meeting ends because I can't stand the stares and whispers anymore. The next morning, Tanner calls with an update. He filed public records requests with Animal Control, the police department, and the HOA for all documentation related to Chewbacca and prior complaints. He explains this will take a few weeks, but should reveal the pattern the Johnsons have been hiding. He says government agencies have to respond to these requests and can't hide information. The records will show every complaint, every incident report, every violation notice. He sounds confident that the paper trail will support our case. 2 days later, I get a call from James's school. The principal wants to meet with us and James to address rumors spreading among students. I drive James to the school the next morning and we sit in the principal's office with his teacher. The principal explains that some kids are saying James is mean to animals. Others are saying he got what he deserved. Some parents have called asking questions. The school wants to get ahead of any bullying before it gets worse. I explain the truth about the attack, show them the medical records and police reports. I tell them about the viral video and the Johnson campaign to blame James. The teacher looks horrified. She says she'll talk to her class about responsible pet ownership and not spreading rumors. The principal agrees to send a note to all parents clarifying that rumors about the incident are not appropriate topics for discussion. James sits quietly through the whole meeting, staring at his bandaged arm. On the drive home, he asks if kids at the school hate him now. I tell him no, they just don't understand what really happened yet. But I'm not sure I believe my own words. That afternoon, I drive back to the school with a folder full of documents. Medical records showing James's injuries, photos of the broken fence, the police report listing 6 prior complaints about Chewbacca. The principal and James's teacher meet me in the main office. I spread everything across the desk and walk them through what really happened. James was playing in our yard. The dog broke through a rotted fence. The attack was unprovoked. The Johnsons immediately blamed James and launched a social media campaign before he was even out of surgery. The teacher picks up the medical photos and her face goes pale. The principal reads through the police report twice. She asks if I'm comfortable with her sending a letter to all parents. I tell her yes, that's exactly what we need. She drafts it while I wait, explaining that rumors about students are inappropriate and asking families to support James's return to the school. She promises to monitor the situation closely and have the counselor check in with James daily. I thank them and leave feeling like at least one thing went right today. When I pull into our driveway 2 hours later, 3 news vans are parked on the street. Camera crews stand on our lawn. A reporter rushes toward my car as I park. I grab James and we hurry to the front door while cameras film us. Michael opens the door and pulls us inside. He's already closed all the curtains. The doorbell rings constantly. Reporters shout questions through the door about the lawsuit and the viral video. Michael tells me they showed up an hour ago after someone called the tip lines. I peek through the curtains and count 5 different stations. A cameraman is filming our house from multiple angles. I grab my phone and start recording video of them on our property. I take photos of the news vans blocking our driveway. Michael photographs the reporters on our lawn and the equipment they've set up. We document everything with timestamps. The harassment continues for 90 minutes before they finally leave. I save all the photos and videos to 3 different places in case we need proof later. The next morning, animal control calls. They've scheduled a dangerous dog hearing for 2 weeks out. The hearing officer will review all evidence and determine if Chewbacca should be classified as dangerous. If classified, the Johnsons will have to follow strict rules about containment and insurance. I immediately call Tanner to tell him. He says this is our first real chance to present everything about the pattern of attacks. He'll prepare a packet of evidence including the 6 prior complaints, photos of James's injuries, and statements from other victims. He sounds confident that the classification will go through. The hearing will be open to the public, so the Johnsons can't hide behind their lawyer. I mark the date on our calendar and start gathering every piece of documentation we have. 3 days later, we're back at the hospital for James's follow-up appointment. The surgeon unwraps the bandages carefully and examines the surgical site. The incisions are healing, but the arm still looks wrong. Swollen, discolored. The surgeon presses gently on different spots and asks James if he can feel it. James says yes to some areas but not others. The surgeon's expression stays neutral, but I can read the concern. He orders nerve conduction tests to measure how the signals are traveling through James's arm. He explains the next few weeks are critical. If the nerves are going to heal, we should see improvement soon. If not, the damage might be permanent. He schedules the tests for next week and says we'll know more then. James asks if his arm will work normally again. The surgeon says he hopes so but can't make promises. We leave with new prescriptions and more questions than answers. That evening, I text Diane and ask for the contact information of the other families she mentioned. She sends me 4 phone numbers. I create a private group chat and introduce myself. Within an hour, all 4 families respond. We start sharing our stories and the similarities are disturbing. Each family says the Johnsons blamed the victim immediately. Each faced aggressive lawsuits. Each dealt with social media attacks. One woman sends screenshots of Karen's posts about her daughter from 3 years ago. The language is almost identical to what she posted about James. Another family shares legal documents showing the Johnsons sued them for $20,000. They settled for $8,000 to avoid trial costs. A third family says they spent $15,000 on lawyers and still lost because the judge believed the Johnsons' witness testimony. We realize we're looking at a deliberate pattern that's been working for years. These people have perfected a system of attack and profit. The public records requests start arriving in Tanner's office. He calls me to go over what they found. Animal control received 6 formal complaints about Chewbacca over 18 months. A jogger reported being chased and bitten. A mail carrier documented aggressive behavior. 2 separate children were cornered and threatened. Each time the Johnsons provided videos or witness statements claiming provocation. Animal control issued warnings but took no action. Tanner sends me copies of everything. I read through each complaint and see the same pattern. The victims describe unprovoked aggression. The Johnsons claim their dog was defending itself. Animal control sides with the dog owners. The complaints get filed away. Nobody connects the pattern until it's too late and another child is in the hospital. I dig deeper into the court records and find something worse. The Johnsons filed 3 previous lawsuits against neighbors for emotional distress to their dogs. The first case settled for $5,000. The second settled for $8,000. The third went to trial and the neighbors lost. The judge awarded the Johnsons $15,000 plus legal fees. I read through the court documents and my stomach turns. These people have turned their aggressive dog into a profit center. They let him attack. They blame the victim. They sue for damages. They either get a settlement or win in court. Then they move on to the next target. James is just the latest in a long line of victims they've exploited. Our insurance adjuster calls the next day. The company is investigating the Johnson claim, but she warns me that defending it could cost more than settling. Legal fees add up fast. Even if we win, we might spend $20,000 on lawyers. The Johnsons know this. They're counting on us being too scared or too broke to fight. The adjuster suggests we consider a settlement offer if one comes. I tell her absolutely not. Settling would validate their lies. It would put money in their pockets. It would leave them free to do this to another family. I don't care what it costs. We're fighting this. I meet with Tanner the following morning to discuss next steps. He suggests filing for a temporary no-contact order against the Johnsons. We document everything. The lawsuit served at the hospital while James was in surgery. The social media posts attacking James. The Facebook messages Karen sent directly to me. The attempts to contact us through neighbors. Tanner prepares the filing and we submit it that afternoon. The hearing is scheduled for next week. If granted, the Johnsons won't be able to contact us except through lawyers. They won't be able to post about us online. They won't be able to harass us while we prepare for the dangerous dog hearing. 2 days later, the CPS caseworker returns for her follow-up visit. She spent the past week interviewing people. Our neighbors on both sides. James's teacher and the school counselor. Our pediatrician. She sits in our living room with her notes and asks follow-up questions. How long have we lived here? What's our relationship with other neighbors? Has James ever had behavioral issues at the school? I answer everything honestly while Michael sits beside me. She tells us the investigation is almost complete. Everyone she spoke with described us as good parents. James's teacher called him one of the kindest kids in her class. Our pediatrician provided records showing consistent care. The neighbors said James is polite and well-behaved. She closes her folder and says she'll have a final determination within a few days. Tanner assured me earlier that CPS would see through the false allegations. I hope he's right. The CPS determination arrives in writing 2 days later, and I file it with our growing stack of documents that might save us. James's first physical therapy appointment is scheduled for the following Tuesday at a clinic 20 minutes from our house. I drive him there with his arm still wrapped in protective bandages, watching him stare out the window without saying much. The therapist introduces herself and explains she'll start with gentle range of motion exercises to see what James can do. She asks him to try lifting his arm, just a little bit, and I watch his face go pale as he attempts the movement. His arm trembles and barely rises an inch before he gasps and pulls it back against his chest. The therapist stays calm and suggests trying a different exercise, but James is breathing too fast now, his eyes wide and fixed on his bandaged arm. She stops immediately and kneels down to his level, telling him it's okay, and they'll take this as slow as he needs. But James can't hear her because he's somewhere else, back in our yard with Chewbacca's teeth tearing into his flesh. I hold him while he shakes and cries, and the therapist gives us privacy until he calms down enough to leave. She walks us out and hands me a modified plan that starts with even gentler exercises he can do at home, building up to what they tried today. I thank her and get James to the car, but I can see the fear in his eyes when he looks at his arm, like he's wondering if it will ever work right again. That night, I call Tanner and tell him about the therapy session. He listens and then suggests we need to get ahead of the narrative before the Johnsons twist this into more ammunition. We spend an hour on the phone crafting a social media statement that sticks to facts without attacking anyone. I write it carefully, explaining that James was playing in our yard when the dog broke through a rotted fence section. I mention he's recovering from surgery and facing months of physical therapy. I state we're cooperating with all investigations and ask for privacy during this difficult time. Tanner reviews it and approves, so I post it to the neighborhood page and my personal accounts. The responses start coming in within minutes, and they're mixed like Tanner warned. Some people double down on defending the Johnsons, but others send private messages apologizing for believing the initial story. 3 neighbors send me photos they took of the Johnsons' fence over the past year, showing how the wood deteriorated and posts loosened. They explain the HOA sent violation notices months ago, but the Johnsons never fixed anything. I forward everything to Tanner and he adds the photos to our evidence file. 2 days later, Tanner receives a formal proposal from the Johnsons' attorney requesting court-ordered mediation in the civil suit. Tanner calls me to explain that mediation is often required anyway before a case can go to trial. He says it gives us a chance to present our evidence in a less formal setting and see if the Johnsons will negotiate, but he doubts they'll bargain in good faith based on their pattern of behavior. I agree to the mediation because Tanner thinks it's worth trying and it's scheduled for 3 weeks out. Meanwhile, the dangerous dog hearing arrives faster than I expected. Animal Control schedules it at their administrative offices, and Tanner comes with us to present evidence. The hearing officer sits behind a desk with thick folders of documents spread in front of her. Animal Control presents first, showing the 6 prior complaints about Chewbacca, along with photos of James's injuries and the broken fence. They walk through each previous incident where someone reported aggressive behavior, and the pattern becomes obvious when laid out chronologically. The Johnsons arrive with their own attorney, a sharp-dressed man who immediately objects to the inclusion of prior complaints. He argues Chewbacca is a loving family pet, who only reacts when provoked by aggressive children. Their attorney presents character references from friends saying the dog is gentle and well-behaved. He shows vet records indicating regular checkups and vaccinations, trying to paint a picture of responsible ownership. The hearing officer reviews everything methodically, taking notes and asking questions. She examines the vet records closely, looking for any history of abuse or trauma that might explain Chewbacca's aggression. The records show nothing unusual, just routine care and normal behavior during exams. She studies the photos of James's injuries for a long time, and I watch her expression shift from neutral to concerned. The hearing stretches past 2 hours as both sides present arguments and evidence. Karen sits across the room glaring at us the entire time, while Brad whispers constantly to their attorney. Finally, the hearing officer closes the folders and delivers her decision. Based on the severity of James's injuries, the pattern of prior complaints, and the evidence of the fence failure, she classifies Chewbacca as a dangerous dog under county regulations. The classification requires the Johnsons to maintain liability insurance of at least $100,000, secure the dog in proper containment with reinforced fencing, and muzzle him whenever he's in public spaces. Karen starts to argue, but the hearing officer cuts her off and explains the decision is final unless they file an appeal. We leave the building, and I feel something close to relief for the first time in weeks. At least now there's an official acknowledgement that Chewbacca is a threat. Tanner warns me not to celebrate yet because the Johnsons will almost certainly appeal. Sure enough, 2 days later he calls to say they filed an appeal of the dangerous dog classification. But Tanner explains the classification stays in effect during the appeal process, so the restrictions on Chewbacca are enforceable right now. For the moment, at least, there are official rules that might protect other children from what happened to James. I barely have time to process that small victory before Tanner calls again with worse news. The Johnsons' attorney filed an amended lawsuit adding a counterclaim against us for defamation. They claim my social media post and our cooperation with other victims amounts to a coordinated campaign to destroy their reputation and cause them emotional distress. They're seeking $75,000 in damages on top of their original claims about Chewbacca. The counterclaim lands like a punch to the stomach because I know exactly what it is. Pure intimidation designed to scare us into silence. And it works because now I'm afraid to say anything publicly about what happened. Tanner assures me the defamation claim is baseless since I only stated facts and didn't make false accusations. But the stress of potentially losing our house to legal fees keeps me awake every night, staring at the ceiling and calculating worst-case scenarios. Michael tries to stay positive, but I can see the worry in his face when he thinks I'm not looking. We're doing everything right, following every rule, and the Johnsons keep finding new ways to attack us. The medical bills keep growing, James is struggling with therapy, and now we're facing expanded legal claims that could bankrupt us even if we win. 3 days after the counterclaim arrives, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. A woman's voice asks if I'm Linda Conway, and when I confirm, she identifies herself as an HOA board member, whose name I barely recognize. She says she needs to tell me something that's been bothering her for months. Brad Johnson has been pressuring the board to side with them in neighborhood disputes, she explains. He's been doing it for over a year, using his position as a longtime resident to intimidate newer board members. She admits she voted with the Johnsons multiple times out of fear of becoming their next target. The guilt has been eating at her since James's attack, watching them do to us what they've done to others. She apologizes for enabling their behavior and offers to provide a written statement about Brad's intimidation tactics if it would help our case. I thank her and immediately call Tanner to tell him about the conversation. He says a statement from a board member about the Johnsons' pattern of manipulation could be valuable evidence and he'll reach out to her directly. 2 days later, my phone rings with a local number I don't recognize. I answer carefully, and a woman introduces herself as a reporter from the county newspaper. She says she's been following the story and wants to understand what really happened, not just get quotes for a sensational piece. Her tone is different from the TV crews who camped outside our house, less aggressive and more curious. She asks if I'd be willing to talk about the incident and the lawsuit, explaining she's been researching the Johnsons and found some interesting patterns in public records. I tell her I need to check with my attorney first, and she gives me her direct number, saying she'll wait to hear from me. After we hang up, I immediately call Tanner and explain the situation. He asks about her questions and tone, then suggests meeting with her off the record to provide context and documentation. He warns me not to say anything that could be used against us in court, but thinks showing her the pattern of complaints and lawsuits might help shift public opinion. The next afternoon, I meet the reporter at a coffee shop 3 towns over where nobody knows me. She's younger than I expected, maybe 30, with a notebook and recorder on the table between us. I spread out copies of the animal control complaints, the HOA violation notices about the fence, and the list of families Diane gave me. The reporter studies each document carefully, taking notes and asking specific questions about dates and details. When I show her the timeline of how the Johnsons operated with previous families, her expression shifts from professional interest to genuine shock. She says this is much bigger than a neighborhood dog controversy. This is a story about people who weaponize the legal system to intimidate and silence victims. She asks if the other families would be willing to talk, and I give her their contact information with permission. We talk for over an hour, and by the end, she's promising to investigate thoroughly before publishing anything. I drive home feeling like maybe the truth will finally come out in a way that matters. That same evening, Michael gets a call from his boss asking him to come in early the next morning for a meeting. Michael's face goes tight with worry because his company has a strict social media policy, and our situation has been all over Facebook. The next morning, he leaves an hour early, and I pace the kitchen waiting to hear what happens. He calls me 2 hours later, sounding relieved but stressed. His boss was supportive and said the company stands behind him, but asked Michael to keep a low profile and avoid any public confrontations that could reflect badly on the business. Michael promised to stay away from social media and let our lawyers handle everything. He comes home looking exhausted, and we sit at the kitchen table not saying much, just grateful he still has his job while everything else falls apart around us. The medical bills start arriving in thick envelopes that I'm afraid to open. The first surgery alone was $18,000, and our insurance covered most of it, but our portion is already over $8,000. More surgeries are scheduled, and each one will add thousands more to what we owe. I'm sitting at the table surrounded by bills when Diane calls to check on James. I tell her about the money, and she immediately suggests creating a fundraising page, saying people in the community want to help. But I can't bring myself to do it because asking for money feels like admitting we can't handle this ourselves. Diane pushes back gently, reminding me that accepting help isn't weakness, and that people need ways to show support. I promise to think about it, but after we hang up, I just stare at the bills and feel ashamed that we're drowning financially on top of everything else. 3 days later, Detective Brooks calls with news that makes my hands shake. She says a neighbor 2 houses down reviewed their doorbell camera footage from the day of the attack and found something important. The video shows the moments right before Chewbacca attacked James. Brooks sends me the file, and I watch it on my laptop with Michael standing behind me. The footage is grainy but clear enough to see James playing with a ball in our yard, nowhere near the fence. He's just throwing the ball up and catching it, completely absorbed in his own world. Then Chewbacca suddenly bursts through the fence section and charges straight at James. There are no rocks, no tormenting, no provocation of any kind. James was just playing in his own yard when the dog attacked him. I watch it 3 times, and each viewing makes me angrier, because this video proves everything the Johnsons said was a lie. Tanner calls within an hour of receiving the footage from Brooks. He's already filed it with Animal Control and the prosecutor's office as evidence contradicting the Johnson narrative. He sounds energized in a way I haven't heard before, explaining this video is a game changer for both the criminal case and our civil defense. I should feel vindicated, but instead I'm filled with rage that we needed video proof for people to believe an 8-year-old boy over the adults who let their dog maul him. Tanner warns me not to post about the video publicly since it's now evidence in an active investigation, but he's confident it will make a significant difference in how authorities view the case. After we hang up, I cry for the first time since the attack, not from sadness but from fury that my son's word wasn't enough. The no-contact order hearing happens the following week at the county courthouse. Michael and I sit with Tanner while the Johnsons sit across the room with their attorney, Karen glaring at us the entire time. The judge reviews the evidence we submitted, including screenshots of the social media harassment, documentation of the lawsuit being served at the hospital, and records of the Johnsons trying to contact us through neighbors despite our requests to stop. Tanner presents everything methodically, and the judge listens without interrupting. When the Johnsons' attorney tries to argue that we're the ones harassing them by organizing other victims, the judge cuts him off and asks for specific evidence. He can't provide any because we've only shared facts and documentation. The judge grants a temporary no-contact order prohibiting the Johnsons from any direct or indirect contact with our family, except through attorneys. As we leave the courthouse, Karen says something to Brad that I can't hear, but her expression makes it clear she's furious about losing this round. 2 days after the hearing, the CPS caseworker calls to tell me their investigation is complete. The finding is unfounded, meaning there's no evidence of neglect or abuse. She apologizes for the intrusion and says she's noting in her report that the complaint appears to have been filed maliciously to harass our family during a medical crisis. I thank her and hang up feeling like I can finally breathe a little easier. One more attack from the Johnsons has been deflected. One more lie has been exposed. I call Michael at work to tell him and hear the relief in his voice, even though we both know this isn't over yet. James has an appointment with the neurologist for nerve conduction tests to see how much damage the attack caused. I sit in the waiting room while they run the tests, watching other families and wondering if they can tell we're the ones from the news. When the neurologist calls us back into his office, he explains the results show significant damage, but also some positive signs of healing. Children's nerves can sometimes recover better than adults, he says, but we won't know the full extent of permanent damage for several months. James will need continued physical therapy and possibly another surgery depending on how the healing progresses. I ask if he'll be able to use his arm normally, and the neurologist won't give me a definite answer, just says we need to wait and see. James asks if he'll be able to play baseball again, and the doctor says maybe, which is better than no, but worse than yes. On the drive home, James is quiet, and I can see him flexing his fingers, testing what works and what doesn't. That night, I lie awake thinking about everything that's happened and realize I can't keep going like this. The anger is eating me alive, making it hard to focus on anything else. I'm snapping at Michael over small things, crying at random moments, having intrusive thoughts about confronting the Johnsons that scare me with their intensity. The next morning, I search for therapists who specialize in trauma and find Catherine Novak, whose profile mentions she works with families dealing with violence and legal stress. I call her office and somehow she has an opening that same week. At my first appointment, I sit in her calm office and everything I've been holding back pours out in a rush. She listens without judgment, and when I finish, she explains that my rage at the Johnsons is completely normal given what they've done to my family. But she says I need healthy ways to process it so I can be present for James instead of consumed by anger. We talk about coping strategies, and she gives me exercises to try when the intrusive thoughts start. I leave feeling like maybe I can learn to carry this without letting it destroy me. 2 days after my therapy session, my phone rings with a number I don't recognize, but the caller ID shows it's from the district attorney's office. I answer and hear Brian Frost introduce himself as the prosecutor assigned to our case. He gets straight to the point and tells me he's considering filing misdemeanor charges against the Johnsons for negligent control of a dangerous animal. I feel a flash of anger because I wanted felony charges, something that would really make them pay for what they did to James. But Brian explains that the video evidence and the 6 prior complaints give him a strong case for a misdemeanor conviction if it goes to trial. He says felony charges require proof of intent or reckless disregard, and while the Johnsons were clearly negligent, proving they intended harm is nearly impossible. I thank him for the call and hang up feeling like it's something but not enough. Never enough for what James went through. The next morning, Tanner calls to tell me mediation has been scheduled for the civil lawsuit in 2 weeks. He explains that mediation is basically a negotiation where both sides sit down with a neutral person who helps them try to reach an agreement. I ask if we have to go, and he says technically no, but judges usually require it before letting a case go to trial. He warns me that the Johnsons will probably make a really low settlement offer just to test whether we're serious about fighting this. He tells me to be ready to walk away from any offer that doesn't cover James's medical costs and hold them accountable. I spend the next few days gathering every medical bill, therapy invoice, and doctor's note we have. Tanner helps me organize everything into a thick binder that shows exactly how much this attack has cost us financially, not even counting the emotional damage. The day before mediation, I wake up to dozens of text messages from neighbors and friends. The local newspaper published the investigative story about the Johnsons and their pattern of attacks and lawsuits. I pull up the article on my phone and start reading. The reporter interviewed 3 other families who went through the same thing we did. She included photos of our broken fence and quoted the animal control officer about the dangerous dog classification. The article lays out how the Johnsons have been using the same playbook for years, blaming victims, filing lawsuits, and manipulating public opinion through social media. Reading it feels like validation, like finally someone with a platform is telling the truth about what these people have been doing to families in our community. My phone doesn't stop buzzing all day. Neighbors who believed the Johnson version of events are sending me apology messages. Some say they feel terrible for judging James without knowing the full story. Others admit they were scared to speak up because they didn't want to become the Johnsons' next target. The HOA board president calls me personally to say the board fully supports our family, and they're reviewing their policies about dangerous dogs in the neighborhood. Michael comes home from work and finds me crying at the kitchen table, but this time it's relief mixed with anger. Relief that people finally see the truth, Anger that it took a newspaper investigation for them to believe us instead of just trusting that an 8-year-old didn't deserve to be mauled. The mediation takes place in a conference room at Tanner's law office. The Johnsons sit on one side of a long table with their attorney. We sit on the other side with Tanner. The mediator is a woman in her 50s who explains the ground rules about respectful communication and confidentiality. Karen and Brad won't look at us directly, which feels like a small victory after all their aggressive confrontations. Their attorney opens by saying his clients are willing to drop their lawsuit if we pay $10,000 toward Chewbacca's vet bills and sign a paper saying we won't talk about what happened. I feel my hands clench into fists under the table. Tanner stays calm and pulls out the binder we prepared. He walks through James's medical costs, the upcoming surgeries, the physical therapy that could last years. He presents a life care plan from James's doctors showing the total costs could go over $100,000. He slides copies across the table, and I watch their attorney's face change as he reads through the documentation. The mediator asks the Johnsons if they understand their dog has been officially classified as dangerous by animal control. She mentions they're facing criminal charges, and the video evidence doesn't support their claims about James provoking the attack. Their attorney asks for a private caucus, and they leave the room for over an hour. When they come back, something has shifted. Karen's aggressive posture is gone, and Brad looks defeated. Their attorney suggests we take a break and reconvene after lunch. Tanner and I walk to a nearby cafe, and he tells me he thinks they're starting to realize they can't win this fight. The newspaper article destroyed their credibility, and the evidence is overwhelming. He says we need to stay firm on our demands, but be willing to negotiate on the details. After 6 hours of back-and-forth negotiation, we finally reach an agreement. The Johnsons will pay all of James's medical expenses, including any future surgeries and therapy sessions. They have to fix their fence at their own cost and keep it maintained properly. They'll cover our legal fees, which have been adding up fast. They have to delete all their social media posts about the incident and stop talking about it publicly. In exchange, we agree not to sue them for additional damages beyond the medical costs, and we have to keep the settlement terms private. I want to push for more, want to make them suffer like James suffered, but Tanner reminds me this gets us what we need most, which is James's medical care covered and protection from their harassment. We sign the papers and leave without saying a word to them. The criminal case keeps moving forward even after the civil settlement. Brian Frost files the misdemeanor negligent control charges officially. The Johnsons' attorney negotiates a plea agreement where they admit guilt, pay a $2,500 fine, and agree to follow all the dangerous dog rules, including eventually giving Chewbacca to a qualified handler who specializes in aggressive dogs. It's not jail time, but it's a criminal conviction on their record, and it forces them to rehome the dog that hurt my son. I tell Brian I'll take it because at least it's something official that says they were wrong and we were right. James's school sends a letter to all the parents explaining that the rumors about James were completely false. The letter asks families to help create a supportive environment when James comes back to the school. His teacher puts together a presentation for the class about being responsible with pets and why it's important not to spread rumors about people. The school counselor calls me to set up a transition plan for James's return, including accommodations for his physical therapy schedule and extra support if other kids give him trouble. 2 months after the attack, James can use about 60% of his arm strength and do most normal things with some adjustments. He can't throw a baseball as hard as before, and writing for long periods makes his hand cramp up. But he can feed himself, get dressed, and play video games, which makes him happy. The physical therapist is positive about his progress and thinks continued therapy will help him get back more function. She's honest that he might always have some problems with that arm, but she's seen kids recover better than anyone expected. I watch James work through his exercises and see him pushing through the pain without complaining. He's tougher than I ever knew, and I'm trying to learn from his ability to keep going forward instead of staying stuck in anger about what happened. Catherine suggests I look into support groups for families who went through dog attacks, and 3 weeks after the settlement, I walk into a community center basement for my first meeting. 6 other parents sit in a circle sharing stories that sound exactly like mine, talking about the fear that never really goes away, and the anger at people who blame kids for being hurt. A woman named Sarah tells us about her son who still won't go near any dogs 2 years after being bitten, and another mom describes losing custody during her divorce because her ex used the attack to paint her as neglectful. I share what happened to James, including the lawsuit and the social media nightmare, and everyone nods like they understand completely, because they lived through the same tactics. After the meeting, 3 parents ask if I'll help them push for stronger dangerous dog laws at the state level, saying my case got media attention and legislators might actually listen. I take their contact information and promise to think about it, realizing this trauma might turn into something useful if we can prevent other families from suffering. The group meets every 2 weeks, and I keep going because it's the only place where I don't have to explain or justify what we went through. During the 4th meeting, I notice a for sale sign went up at the Johnson house. Michael saw it that morning and texted me a photo, and I feel this weird mix of relief and satisfaction, knowing they can't face the neighborhood anymore. The sign says the house is priced to sell fast, like they want to get out as quickly as possible. Diane messages our group chat saying she drove past and saw Karen loading boxes into a moving truck, not making eye contact with anyone. 2 days later, animal control calls to tell me Chewbacca's transfer got approved, and a licensed handler picked him up that morning. The officer explains the handler works with aggressive dogs and has the right setup to keep everyone safe, which is more than the Johnsons ever managed. I ask if they'll face any other consequences, and she says the criminal conviction stays on their record, the fine is paid, and they're banned from owning dogs in this county. It's not perfect justice, but it's something real and official. 3 months after the attack, I'm watching James play video games with both hands, His right arm's still weaker but functional enough for most things. The physical therapist says he's recovering better than she expected and might get back 80% of his strength with continued work. He goes to therapy twice a week without complaining and does his exercises at home even when they hurt. The neighborhood feels different now, like people actually see us instead of just believing whatever story gets posted online. Families stop by with meals or offers to help with James's medical appointments. The HOA sent a formal apology letter and changed their policies about investigating complaints before taking sides. Our insurance covered most of the medical bills, and the settlement takes care of the rest. So we're not facing bankruptcy like Diane's family did. I still see Catherine every week because the anger and fear don't just disappear, but I'm learning to live with them instead of letting them control everything. James asks if we can get a dog someday, which surprises me until I realize he's not scared of all dogs. Just that one. I tell him maybe when he's older and we'll research breeds carefully and do everything right. Michael and I are talking about moving to a different neighborhood for a fresh start, somewhere the Johnsons never lived and nobody knows what happened. But we're not rushing the decision because James is comfortable here now and his friends rallied around him once the truth came out. The scars on his arm are permanent reminders of what happened. Thin white lines that will fade but never fully disappear. Some mornings I still wake up thinking about that day, seeing his blood on my hands and hearing Karen's voice in the hospital. But then James walks into the kitchen asking what's for breakfast, and I remember we made it through the worst part. The legal nightmare is over. The Johnsons are gone and my son is safe. I can finally take a full breath without feeling like something terrible is about to happen. That's the story from my side. But you know what? Your perspective always flips things in the best way. Drop a comment and tell me how you see it. I'll be reading.